Hey, this is episode number 33 of I Love This Album. This is one I'm going back, all the way back to 1984 to one of my favorite, biggest albums of my youth, which a lot of these albums are. And this is, today I'm going to talk about, as you can see down below in the description, or I should go this way. This is W.A.S.P's very first album, the self-titled album. And there it is right there from 1984. One of my, not early biggest favorite albums, but pretty early. I was 14 years old when this album came out. And it was a big one for me. The very first album I ever did, I think it was, the first one I did in this, I always have to do this air quotes, series, was Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil. And for me, W.A.S.P, the W.A.S.P album, the debut W.A.S.P album in 1984, was almost like the next, the next natural step for me in music, and maybe the music scene in general. They were both from LA, Motley Crue and W.A.S.P were both from LA, from the Sunset Strip scene, I guess. And they were both very visual, very heavy, at that time heavy. You know, thrash metal was kind of just starting then, but they were heavier than Van Halen, let's say, AC/DC, and a new style for sure. And I loved, as I said in the first episode, I loved Shout the Devil. And so when the W.A.S.P album came out in 1984, I thought this is almost like, for me, the next Motley Crue album, and it was much better than Theater of Pain, which was Motley Crue's next album in 1985. So this album came out in 1984. Now, my history with W.A.S.P, I'm sure I remember hearing first Show No Mercy. I've mentioned this before, but I used to tape. There used to be a lot of metal radio shows back then. A station when I lived. This is when I lived in Toronto. There was a radio station called Chum FM, which was 104.5. That used to have. I think it was on Saturday nights. Saturday nights, they had a show called, I guess it was the Power Hour or something like that. And then Q107, which was and I guess still is 107.1. CILQ, Q107 in Toronto, had a show, it was on Friday. It was called the Midnight Metal Hour, something like that. And there were some special episodes they did that were 6 hours. I remember once my friend Jeff Simpsons was over at my house and we listened to it all night from midnight until like 6 in the morning. And I wrote down, I maybe have that somewhere, all the songs that they played in those 6 hours. And I'm sure I heard Show No Mercy from this W.A.S.P album in 1984, and I clearly remember having it on tape, and also Fuck Like a Beast, which it turns out or Animal, Fuck Like a Beast, which was the single, and maybe from what I remember, it came out before the actual album came out. That's what I remember, Show No Mercy and Animal, hearing those and having those on tape before I heard the album. I'm not sure. A little bit more of my history with W.A.S.P. I have seen them twice. I saw them on January 19th, 1985 with Metallica and Armored Saint. W.A.S.P was headlining that tour. And then I saw them again long time later, 16 years later in 2001 in Las Vegas, of all places, at the House of Blues at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. I saw them in October, can't remember the date, 2001, with a band called Pissing Razors was opening. 16 years between W.A.S.P shows. And the reason for that is I was never a huge W.A.S.P fan, despite how much I loved this album that I'm going to get to shortly. I was never a huge W.A.S.P fan. And I kind of, looking back, and I'm not sure why. And I've also mentioned before, when you do 33 of these episodes, you tend to repeat yourself. This, maybe I should go back and listen. I would say after I never even bought the second W.A.S.P album, which was Last Command. I never bought that. And I did buy the next one after that, which was Inside the Electric Circus. And I loved it. I never bought another W.A.S.P album after that. Headless Children, Crimson Idol, Helldorado. I can't even remember the names of the albums. Not only did I not buy them, I never even heard them. Whatever video they had from each of those albums, at least the Headless Children, Crimson Isle, whatever, I heard The Real Me and I loved it. The Who cover, which was on, can't even remember which album that was on. I did love that. But I don't think I've ever, including up to now, never heard another W.A.S.P song after 1988, 89, around there. And I'm not sure why, because they're a really good band. They had a really good sound. I'll maybe talk about that as I go on. Blackie Lawless. Obviously, Wasp really is Blackie Lawless. I think he's had a real revolving door of musicians since the I don't know, third album, something like that. Second, I'm not sure. But maybe this is a time for me to go back, as I've said before about some other bands. And I have gone back and listened to some albums from these other bands that I've talked about in this series and really enjoyed them. So I'll have to do that with Wasp. Another little bit of my history with Wasp. This is something really stupid. When Last Command came out in 1985 at some point, there used to be another show, a Toronto show, a video show on City TV. It was called Toronto Rocks, where they showed videos. And they had a midweek Metal Mania. Everybody liked that alliterative thing, the M&M, midweek Metal Mania. And they used to have, long before the internet, you used to hear about concerts in various ways. You could read about them. I remember reading about concerts in Circus Magazine. When the new Circus Magazine came out, they had tour dates, which you didn't know about. Sometimes you would hear them announced on the radio. And Toronto Rocks, I remember very well. I was at my friend Pete's house, and we were watching Toronto Rocks, and then they announced, they said, coming to Toronto at Maple Leaf Gardens I think it was in April 1986. The concert, the announcement was a month or two before that. This was before the days when they announced concerts like a year in advance. And so he said, I think it was John Major was the host. He said, coming to Toronto, Maple Leaf Gardens, Black Sabbath. And Pete and I looked at each other and said, holy shit, Black Sabbath is coming to Maple Leaf Gardens. And then he said, opening is Wasp. And we went, holy shit, Wasp. And then we said, are you going to go? I think I said to Peter, are you going to? He said, nah. I said, yeah, me neither. So we were excited for 1 second. Now at that point, Black Sabbath was a zero band to me. I couldn't have cared less about Black Sabbath at that point. Their old stuff was still great, but at that point what Black Sabbath was doing was Love is a Stranger, or whatever that song was called, was a horrible song. And so I got excited about seeing Wasp, which at that point would have been a second time, but it didn't buy it. But Wasp did on Eglinton Avenue in Toronto, actually in Scarborough, Eglinton Avenue East. Black Sabbath did the night of the concert. They did an in-store, they used to call these things, when bands would go to record stores, and you would line up outside and they would sign your records or whatever you brought with them. And I remember I did go to that, and they were giving out cardboard cutouts of The Last Command, which I never did buy. I'm not sure why, but I went to the autograph signing, didn't go to the concert. I took pictures of all of them, Blackie Lawless, Chris Holmes, Randy Piper, and at that point it was Steve Riley on drums. I got pictures with them. Those pictures are probably still, not probably, they are still at my mother's house somewhere. So I did meet Wasp the night that they played Toronto, but I never went to that concert. So that's my history with Wasp. And they were a big deal when they came out, when this album came out in 1984. This was again at a time when everything was different. There was a lot of hype about bands, and everybody knew about Wasp. And so when this album came out, it was kind of following Motley Crue. As I said, to me, it was almost like a follow-up to it. They were, ugly. They wore crazy clothes. They had fire. They had a huge image. Their music was kind of similar, kind of violent, maybe even aggressive, and big deal. And when it came out, they were maybe not quite as big as maybe they should have been, or maybe that I was expecting them to be. But Wasp really made a mark when this album came out in 1984. So I'm going to get to the album now. So here it is again, in case you forgot what it looked like. That's the first Wasp album from 1984. Now this version that I have, this came out in 2004 or something like that. This has a slightly different track list. This had Animal, Fuck Like a Beast as the opening track. I never knew it as that. To me, Animal was a single. I never bought that. I always saw it at Record Peddler, and especially Records on Wheels. It had the codpiece here, and with the I think it was a saw blade and like a leopard print or something. Very 80s. I never bought it, but I did know it. So to me, the first song that I knew on this album all along was I Want to Be Somebody. Want It. I'm not going to sing it. Little tease there. There's no way I could sing like Blackie Lawless or anybody for that matter. But I Want to Be Somebody, that was a pretty big hit. That video was on constantly on the aforementioned Toronto Rocks Midweek Metal Mania. That video was on constantly. And then on Much Music was a little bit later. But I Want to Be Somebody was a massive song. I don't remember hearing it on the radio too much aside from the metal shows, but it was the video was huge. And what a great anthem that was. I got really tired of it at the time, but like some other things I've talked about, I would say The Number of the Beast was one, War Pigs was another one, and I Want to Be Somebody was another one that I was tired of at the time, but over some years I went back and now I love I Want to Be Somebody. You say you don't want to run and hide a face that no one knows, and everyone you meet, you're going to show you're nobody's slave, nobody's chains are holding you. You hold your fist up high and rule the zoo. I should go back and edit this, but I'm not going to bother to cut out my terrible singing. So I Want to Be Somebody, great song, great anthem, amazing song, fantastic way in my mind to open the album, although it wasn't this one. Next was, and there was a great line. And Wasp, I've been listening to this album a lot the last few days and really, really enjoying it. And something I realized is I think maybe almost every single song on this album, they mention either fire or flames or something is burning. And there was a great line in I Want to Be Somebody. I guess it was the bridge that leads into the solo. It was, I want shiny cars and dirty money, lots of rock and roll. I will live in fame and die in flames. I'm never getting old. And in the video for that, Blackie Lawless was in a limousine. Killer song, that is. I Want to Be Somebody. Love Machine. Lady, Have You Know Me, My Perfect Love Machine. I'm Virgo, my Leo's rising. Venus made me king. That trail of broken hearts, they all belong to me. Magic runs through my fingers. One touch you'll see. L-O-V-E. Another great anthem, although it never caught on. There was no video for it. As far as I remember, there was just the one video for I Want to Be Somebody. But L-O-V-E, All I Need's My Love Machine, was another great, great anthemic Wasp song. The Flame, there's one again they mentioned the flame right in the title. I just talked about how they talk about fire and flames and burning. Give Me a Tech, was that the one? Yeah, great vocal on this one. Maybe my favorite, Blackie Lawless. He's just screaming. Give me a ticket on a jet airplane. I'm gonna take it. Great song, The Flame. That was one I don't think I liked too much. I loved it at the time, but when I've been listening to this album in the last few days, I think, man, I kind of forgot how great The Flame is until the flame burns out. The flame and burn. They mentioned both of the words in that song. B.A.D. This is another and kind of a strange thing unique about Wasp was it was Wasp, W.A.S.P, sorry, I should go this way, W.A.S.P, which some people claim that it stood for We Are Sexual Perverts. I think Blackie Lawless said that himself. And then they had L-O-V-E machine. They like to spell. Maybe Blackie Lawless had in a past life, maybe he was on Sesame Street, or maybe he had a secret yearning to be on Sesame Street and teach kids how to spell. But he had L-O-V-E, Love Machine, and then B-A-D. B-A-D, bad, make your mom and daddy sad. Kind of cheesy lyrics, but how did that one go? Very amateur here. You hear the cries of love, a sad tune, and feel the salt lick stinging. Love's wound. Those tears that you cry are a love stain. They fall to the ground like a sweet rain. 'Cause bad girls, they do B-A-D, bad. Make your mom and daddy sad. Excellent song. This is 4 for 4. How many songs am I on? 4. B.A.D. is the 4th song, and it's killer song. Next was School Days. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm not American, but I know that song. I know that, whatever you call that verse, because of Wasp. And cheesy lyrics looking back on it. It was about, now Blackie Lawless, I guess, is well into his 60s. I don't know if they play this song live. But School Days, I'm Here Doing Time. Another great vocal in this song was in the second verse, maybe. I gotta find it, where he just screams. A homework hellhound screams at me, make the grade. I can't scream like him, but makes the grades. Just screams that line. I love it. And then again, going back to the burning and the fires, a fire bell is ringing out, and there was a bell in the song. A fire bell is ringing hell, and I'd sure love to see it blaze. Burn it down! Great vocal, killer vocal. Blackie Lawless had a very strong, powerful voice. He used to really holler. That was, now for me, that was the, I think, was that the last song? Yeah, that was the last song on side 1 when I listened to the album. I still sometimes think of these things as albums rather than CDs, but School Days was the last song on side 1. And I only found out many years later, clearly well into the internet age, that School Days was a single, I guess like one of those 12-inch singles, and the B-side was Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones. I never knew that until, I don't know, yeah, into the 2000s for sure. Never knew that. I downloaded it some time ago, and kind of cool that W.A.S.P did a cover of Paint It Black. What's next? Hellion, Hellhound, the leather on your legs, the leather on your legs. The smoking powder keg is the smoking powder keg you're riding on is hellbound. Hellion. What else can I say about that song? Another good one. This is like back in the days of albums, you used to get a second chance to kind of open the album because it was the first song on the second side. The Devil's Hellion Child, Hellion will never have to die. Excellent song. I have to sneeze. I'm not going to edit that out. I'm going to leave the sneeze in. Excuse me. Next was Sleeping in the Fire, which I guess was, I wouldn't say a ballad. Probably back then I was a stupid 14-year-old kid. I probably considered that a ballad at that time. But it was still, and again with the fire, Sleeping in the Fire. So we had the flame, we had Sleeping in the Fire. He wants to burn down the school. He wants to live in flames, or he's going to die in flames. Everything is on fire on this album. But there's no, they should have had some kind of fire on the album cover. Yeah, Sleeping in the Fire was good. A quiet song. It had a quiet introduction to it. I wouldn't call it a ballad, but very good song. And they did, there's an acoustic version of it. I don't know what it's from. I think it came out many years later. Maybe as a bonus track to like one of their 90s album that's purely acoustic of Sleeping in the Fire. That's also really good. Maybe even better than this one. On Your Knees, You Shall Be on Your Knees. Dancing with Danger. Very 80s metal song and lyrics to that. A little bit rebellious. You Shall Be on Your Knees. Next was Tormentor. I haven't mentioned my favorite songs yet because I'm not sure if I'm saying now that Tormentor is my favorite song, but it's for sure one of them. And maybe what else did I miss? Any of the first, Love Machine. The Flame was never a favorite, although in recent years it has become maybe Bad could be a favorite. But maybe Tormentor. Tormentor was a darker song, and I thought it was funny that I was already into Slayer at this point. By the time this Wasp album came out, I had been a Slayer fan, I guess around that same time. And they both had, Slayer had Tormentor on Show No Mercy, a song called Tormentor. And Slayer had their first album was called Show No Mercy, and there was a song on the first Slayer album also called, the title track was Show No Mercy. I thought, wow, Wasp is like, I don't know if I actually thought they were ripping them off. I have no idea. I'm sure they weren't. And then later, Slayer also had on their first album a song called The Final Command, and then Wasp, their next album was The Last Command. So I thought I was associated with Wasp and Slayer. And then they toured together in 1986 or 87 with Raven too. That played in Toronto. I didn't go to that. I'm a liar and I'm a cheat. I have no morals and I'm a thief. Pillage and plunder, cursed of Curse those who enter. I am a killer. I'm tormentor. Yeah, that could be a favorite. Heavier. That's a little bit heavier, darker, and something. I know this one. He also mentions fire, and that I guess at the end again, it's at the bridge. I guess going into the solo. What's the lyric? I always thought it sounded like Paul Stanley. He says the lyric ends with fire. Let me check here. I can't remember it off the top of my head. I am the Lord of liars, and I command the force of fire. And I command the force of fire. Fire, fire. To me, it sounded like Paul Stanley. Totally like Paul. I'm not saying it was. I know it wasn't. But it really, really didn't sound like Blackie Lawless at all. It sounded like Paul Stanley in... I think it was Under the Gun from Animalize. I know Under the Gun is from Animalize, but I think it was that song where Paul Stanley had that really high voice singing fire, fire. And so Tormentor, that one tiny, tiny part always reminded me of Paul Stanley singing. And again, Blackie Lawless is talking about fire. And then the last song, as I knew it, is The Torture Never Stops. You're hanging by your balls. I was 14 years old when this album came out, and I always liked that line, you're hanging by your... It was... hanging up yourself, you're hanging by your balls. As a 14-year-old, I probably thought that was pretty cool. So that's the last song. Now, this one did have... as I said, it opened with Animal, Fuck Like a Beast, and it did have Show No Mercy as a bonus track, and also Painted Black as a bonus track. Show No Mercy is excellent too. As I said, the first song I heard, and Animal, I didn't talk about those two. Animal, Fuck Like a Beast was obviously one of the most controversial songs at that time. A pelvic thrust and the sweat starts to sting. I'll nail your ass to a pelvic thrust and the sweat starts to sting you. I fuck like a beast. I'll nail your ass to the sheets. Very provocative song that was. That was on I think one of the songs that the PMRC was really, really after. Not I think, it was for sure. And Show No Mercy, also a great, great song. This whole album is killer. That's what I'm talking about. I love this album. I'm not ending it there. But just a little bit more about Wasp. As I said, I'm not a big fan of their catalog, although I love this album. I'm not ending it again. But I think back then I knew, and maybe I forgot over the years, and I've also realized it in more recent years, what a great band they were. Blackie Lawless, man, that guy, he didn't sound like anybody, and nobody really sounded like him. He had I mentioned it a little bit earlier, he had a very, very strong, powerful, shouting voice, sounded great. Chris Holmes, I've mentioned before that I don't really pay too much attention to guitar solos. I love guitar solos, but I had a conversation with my friend Jason McKittrick the other day in Toronto, and we were talking about Van Halen. He said, what's your favorite Eddie Van Halen solo? And I said, I don't know. I don't really pay attention to solos. When I hear them, I think, I love this solo. It's great. But I don't, it's not like songs where I know this is my favorite, this is my favorite, this is my favorite. But as I've been listening to this album recently, I remember all the solos, and I thought, Chris Holmes was I think a really, really good guitarist. Maybe not in terms of riffs. I think maybe the one true great riff on this song was the last one. The Torture Never Stops, the opening riff. Very metal riff. And make no mistake that this is a heavy metal album. This was not glam rock or hard rock. This is, in my world, when I was 14 years old, and I still say now, it was a heavy metal album for sure. And I think Wasp maybe didn't get when my friends and I, when we talked about our favorite singer or favorite guitarist or bass player, not me nor any of my friends, I don't think ever mentioned anybody from Wasp. And when you saw the Hit Parade or Circus, how they had the readers polls where you'd vote for your favorite guy at every instrument, Wasp never was on any of those. Maybe because they weren't big like Motley Crue and Rat. But yeah, I think a great. I thought of Warren DeMartini at that time and George Lynch, and I don't know who else, but I never really thought of Chris Holmes as a great guitarist. But looking back on it, Chris Holmes is pretty fucking good. So that's my little wrap up about Wasp. Just like some other bands I've talked about, I'm leading to it. Here it comes. I'm not a huge fan of their catalog, although maybe I'll change that. But I do love this album.